Hello, everyone. I am Indita Rifai, and today I will be talking about something that I have been finding interesting, which is the Standing Rock protest and the Dakota Access Pipeline. So let's get started. What exactly happened? In 2016, the Standing Rock Sioux tribe in North Dakota, Sioux is spelled Sioux, the Standing Rock Sioux tribe in North Dakota, alongside thousands of allies, came together to fight against the construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline, or DAPL. And for the Sioux, this was about defending their water, their land, and their cultural heritage, and it's no longer the concern of a mere stopping a pipeline, because it was also now about standing up to a literal history of broken promises from the US government. The reason Standing Rock matters is because it exposed some serious contradiction in American society. On the one hand, the US claims to stand for freedom, democracy, and justice, but on the other hand, when it comes to indigenous people and their rights, we see how these values often don't apply. So today I'm going to explain why Standing Rock is such an important event, and not just for the Sioux, but for everyone who cares about justice, environmental protection, and pretty much human rights. So let's set the stage by seeing and understanding the basic geography of this issue. The Dakota Access Pipeline is a 1,100-mile pipeline that was built to carry crude oil from the back-end oil fields in North Dakota down to Illinois. Originally, this pipeline was set to pass near Bismarck in North Dakota, which a place with a 92% of population consisting of white people. However, when Bismarck residents, which consisted of the people I just explained, the Bismarck residents, they raised concerns about potential oil spills contaminating their water supply. Because they protested, the route then changed, and now instead the pipeline was rerouted to go through the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation. This decision put the tribe's primary water source, which is Lake Oahe, directly in harm's way. And this was a huge issue because for the Sioux, water isn't just something they drink. Because to them, water is a sacred thing. It is central to their spirituality and their overall way of life. The lake was not just a water source. Again, it was a lifeline for them. And on top of that, the pipeline threatened sacred burial grounds and their cultural sites. So to me, this wasn't just about oil. It was now about the disregard for the indigenous rights and the disrespect for a group of people who had lived on this land for centuries. And the government didn't consult the tribe or give them any say in this decision. They just decided it was what it is. And that's where the real fight started. You're free to read the descriptions I have wrote, or pause to see the map for yourself. Now, the true scale of impact. So why does Standing Rock matters so much? Why did it get so much attention? One reason I could think why Standing Rock is so significant is that it marked a turning point, as one would say, a turning point in how indigenous rights are seen. So not just in the US, but around the world. The protest wasn't just about one pipeline, and then it already became a symbol of indigenous unity and the fight for justice. And at its peak, over 200 tribes came together at Standing Rock. This was the largest intertribal alliance in over a centuries. I'm saying tribes that had been divided by histories and geography came together in this particular event because they realized their fight was the same. They have a common enemy, the fight for their land, their sovereignty, and their water. That is why this is so significant. That is what makes Standing Rock protest so special. And it wasn't just the tribes. This protest got global attention. And people from all over the world were watching and supporting the water protectors. That's what they call themselves, water protectors. That's so cool. And the movement wasn't just about fighting, because it then turned into an environmental justice protest for indigenous people's rights. And it got the attention of mainstream media, politicians, and activists from every corner of the world. So in that protest, it wasn't just the tribes, but it was there were allies as well. And Again, what makes Standing Rock special is how it put indigenous rights into the global spotlight in a way that hadn't happened in recent history. It shows the world that these struggles are still going on and that the indigenous people are still fighting for their right to live in a way that honors their cultural heritage, which are still violated. Now, this is their motto, which is Mini Wichoni, or Water is Life. That is what it is, direct translation. One of the most powerful things, I believe, that came out of Standing Rock was this very slogan, Mini Wichoni, or Water is Life in Lakota language. This phrase became the heartbeat, I would say, of the protest. For the Sioux, water is not just a resource, because again, as I have mentioned briefly, it is a sacred. They see it as a living entity that has a spiritual connection to their people. The phrase water is life represents their deep belief that water sustains all life and must be protected at all costs. But what really struck me about Standing Rock is that the water protectors didn't call themselves protesters. They rejected that label instead, and they called themselves water protectors instead of, let's say, DAPL fighters or like pipeline fighters. No, they choose to call themselves water protectors. And this is a big deal because it shows how they framed the movement as something more than just a political fight. Excuse me. It wasn't about fighting anymore because it was about protecting something that is sacred. This wasn't just about resisting either because they're trying to preserve a way of life, a way of their life. So by choosing to call themselves water protectors, they were reclaiming the narrative, they were reclaiming the site by positioning themselves as the guardian of this land and water, not just, people opposing something. And this simple, very, very simple shift in language shows the spiritual depth of the protest. It helps us understand that, oh, wow, this is what they're actually fighting for. Now, this is the legal side. Now let's take a look at the legal side of this fight. The Treaty of Fort Laramie that was written in 1851. Now, this treaty guaranteed the Sioux exclusive rights to their land. In Article 5, you're free to pause and read it yourself. But overall, it said that the Sioux Nation had exclusive rights to their territory, including the Missouri River, which was the water source threatened by the pipeline. So in other words, US government promised the Sioux their land would be respected and that no one would disturb it without their consent. But that is exactly what happened. The government ignored the Sioux's right, pushed the pipeline through their land without their approval, and violated the very same treaty that was supposed to protect their land and water. This is one of the main reasons Standing Rock was so important, because this is now about how the US government keeps on breaking promises to the Sioux nations, which have been made for hundreds of years. As you can see, it was made in 1851. Now, let's talk about something. Let's move on to something that I personally find interesting, which is the use of symbols and signs in the Standing Rock protest. I want to take a minute to explain the concept of semiotics, or at least attempt to the best of my abilities, which is the study of signs and symbols and how they create meaning. One of the most powerful symbols at Standing Rock was the phrase, again, water is life, their slogan. But it wasn't just a slogan, because it became the symbol of the movement. As the theorist Roland Barthes would say, myths are created when something ordinary gets elevated to a symbol of deeper meaning. Or, if I get the phrasing correctly. And that's exactly what happened with Water is Life. It became the myth of the movement and a symbol of cultural survival and basically spiritual resistance. But the use of symbol wasn't just limited to words in this case, in this particular event, because buffalo sightings at the protest were viewed as a sign of spiritual support. So yeah, during one of the many days of protest, there were buffaloes. There were literal buffaloes, as I have attached, but yes, they were no longer viewed as as merely sightings, but now viewed as signs of spiritual support. They're not just animals, and even they mentioned that it is now part of a prophecy. And these signs, they carried meaning that went beyond what we see on the surface, and it was not just about oil again anymore. It was about reclaiming cultural identity and telling a different story, one that reversed the earth instead of exploiting it. So this use of symbol and signs helped to frame the protest as something that was much more than just a political resistance. As now, it became a cultural and spiritual movement that used myth to tell the story of the Zeus connection to Earth. And now let's move on to the paradoxes, which was briefly of which the concept was briefly explained in Andrew Dix's chapters. The first paradox that I would like to talk about is the freedom versus control. Well, as we have known, America is supposed to be the land of the freedom. It was a place where we can speak our minds and protest when we see injustice. But at the Standing Rock, when the water protectors, protested, they were met with militarized police and violence, as you can see in the picture I have attached. America loves to say that freedom of speech is protected, but when it came to the water protectors, their right to protest peacefully was pretty much violently suppressed. So this is the paradox. In a country that claims to protect freedom, the government used force to stop people who were simply trying to protect their land peacefully and their water. It shows that freedom isn't always applied equally, especially for indigenous people in this context. And the second paradox I would like to discuss is the religion versus violence. America, when we hear America and religion, what goes into most of our minds is in God we trust. It's one of the core values that the country was founded on. But when it came to Standing Rock, the US government failed to respect spiritual practices of the Sioux and the water protectors. For the Sioux, this protest was not just about blocking a pipeline, because again, it has something to do with their religion. It was about fulfilling a sacred duty, even, to protect this very water, this very land, and their ancestors. But when they performed these religious ceremonies, they were met with violent responses, such as the military group forcefully relocating them from the police, including tear gases, rubber bullets, and militarized force. So this paradox highlights how America claims to support religious freedom, but indigenous spiritual practices were treated with disrespect, and the US government protected mainstream religion and freedom, which is Christianity, but ignored these religious practices. So what this highlights is a very, very much ugly double standard in how freedom of religion is applied in the US. So, why does it matter? Why does Standing Rock matter? Because, as I have stated multiple times during this presentation, this no longer concerns mere pipelines, because this was about justice and the right to protect one's rights, one's land. Standing Rock protest, I believe it exposed some major paradoxes in American identity, which we just talked about. It showed that even in a country that was built on freedom and democracy, some people's rights, which has legal written treaties, are still overlooked, especially when it comes to indigenous people. But Standing Rock also was about resilience, and water protectors showed the world that indigenous people still have a voice and that they still have power to speak, to move, and to protest. This movement was a call to action, I believe. It shows us that indigenous rights are human rights, and we need to support these movements moving forward. And yes, thank you. Know your rights and protect what is yours. Thank you for listening. I hope this very short presentation gave you a better understanding of why Standing Rock was so important and how it fits into a larger fight for indigenous rights. Because Standing Rock, again, was not just about one protest. I believe it was a wake-up call for the world to recognize the struggles of indigenous people and to take a real look at how we treat the earth. I personally encourage all of you to think about how you can support indigenous rights, starting from, in the future, and be more aware of the ongoing struggles. You can check on forums, engage in support of discourse. Anything will work as long as you're supporting. But yes, thank you again for listening, and I look forward to your thoughts and questions. Feel free to drop them down below, and I will try my best to answer and interact. Thank you very much.